Hi, everyone. My name is Future Kane. Marlene, thank you so much for the information that you provided to everyone. And it is important for me to note and the panel that the panel wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for Marlene and a lot of her information helping us behind the scenes. So thank you for doing all of that and spreading so much love. First, I want to introduce everyone because everybody in the room may not know who everyone is. So if you can all share out to the audience a little bit about yourself with introducing yourself as well. John, thank you for volunteering to go first.
Am I going to get in trouble? Can I try to get in trouble? Long-time listener, first-time caller? No. So my name is John Brzezowski. Been involved with the industry for a long time. Couldn't be flattered. I'm beyond flattered to be here. So thank you for having me. Very interested to share some perspectives about diversity and DEI. So thank you.
Tina, thank you so much.
Hi, Tina Morris. My day job is at AWS. I am also a volunteer here on the NANOG board, on the ARIN board, and previously ARIN Advisory Council. So I do quite a bit with the community and the various conferences. It gives me kind of what I see as a unique perspective.
My name is Edward McNair, and I'm the Executive Director of NANOG, and it's a thrill to be here.
Jill, thank you, Edward.
Hi, I'm Jill Bender. I'm a software engineer. I'm not actually in the network operator community, but I had the pleasure of coming when I was just starting my career in tech, and NANOG's always inspired me.
Cam?
Hi, everyone. My name is Cam Agahian. I'm Director of Cloud Engineering with Oracle. I presented 4 times different sessions in NANOG, and today this is my 6th, and in about 1 hour, I'm going to be presenting the 7th session. Thank you.
Before we begin, it is important that we establish we're all sitting up on this panel as a very diverse panel in many different ways and intersectionalities. And we sit up here today in love, in unity, in spreading awareness and education that some people may not know or some people are seeking an understanding of. It's important that unity, not uniformity, must be our aim as a society, as a world, as humanity. We attain unity only through variety. Differences must be integrated, not alienated, not absorbed. So to begin focusing in on unity, we are going to ask a set of questions to each of you. And thank you for your bravery and your vulnerability with sharing not only your experiences, but your education too. The first question that we have is on the screen for all of you to see. It is, what are some specific examples of successful hiring tactics you have employed within your team that have led to more diverse candidates? Jill, I'm going to ask if you would be so kind to answer this question.
Thank you. I gave you some examples in my previous talk, but one that I really have found success with personally is aggressively reaching out to people to apply, to really take a look at who's applying in your candidate pool before you get started with the next phase of your process. This can really help find people who would really bring a lot to your organization that may not have applied otherwise and might just need a little bit of a nudge. And that is how I have found many wonderful people that I have had the pleasure to work with.
Thank you for that. Something I'll expand on too with that, Jill, is in order to be aggressive, you have to have diverse candidates in your connections. And I know there's a lot of people, if you look at the people that they are connected to, there's not a lot of connections from diversity and all intersectionalities that they are associated with. So that is something that as humans, we have to be very intentional about.
There is a tool you can use to check your LinkedIn connections to get a quick count of the diversity. I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure you can find it out there on the internet.
John, I think you have something to add too.
So Jill, something you said in the previous talk really resonated with me, and I want to claim guilt over something. So I forget, it was a bias of some sort. So I come from a very high pressure, large scale operator environment. So I used to, what I would call, have an allergic reaction to, what I would consider academic hires, right? It's not a personal, it's just pressure, right? Like so much pressure to ramp people up, get stuff done. So to jump in on this topic that you're commenting on, we would, in a weird way, proactively weed out what we thought were, academic hires, only to find a few years later that, just because we were possibly being the wrong candidates, we were not changing the nature of the business by not inviting new people into the business, right? So for me, I thought long and hard about what you said here in the few minutes I was listening to your talk, and honestly, I have guilt in that, I can claim guilt in that area, but you have to really invest the time and the energy to kind of point to notice that, because you're not going to change the way you operate your business unless you bring new thinking and people into the ecosystem, right?
Thank you for that add. Okay, the next question that we are going to discuss. What are the challenges of hiring for diversity? And what have you found to be the benefits to having a diverse team? John, since you replied back to Jill, I'm going to ask you to respond to this question.
Test.
Perfect. Hello again. So it's interesting, you and I were talking about this earlier. One of the things that I found in particular is the system, and again, not to kind of shine a light on Jill here, but the system is engineered for a very specific way of doing business. And what we found is continuing to use the same process and expecting different result is just, there's a saying for that. It's like insanity, right? So a lot of what we ended up doing is, one of the biggest challenges we had is the talent pool. And as you and I talked about outside before the panel here, it starts way before you get resumes in the door. I had the honor to work for a lot of leaders who had that vision. And as far as I ever got was going back to like early university engagement to really help shift that thinking, and ultimately so that you can shift the composition of the candidate pool. Honestly, Future, it was one of our biggest challenges, because we, going back to the pressure of ramping people up, getting the right people on board, it felt like mission impossible in many cases. So if I can summarize, I would say one of our biggest problems was just not having an adequate talent pool to pick from that was diverse. It was very homogenous, right? So there's a lot of investment that had to be made in time and talent and just out of the box thinking to kind of alter that population so that we could make sure that we're hiring people for success. I briefly shared a story with you out in the hallway. I'll be even briefer here, but I've had the unfortunate observation of seeing people who got thrust into a situation where diversity became a checkbox, and it was very unfortunate, the outcome, right? People were, they failed, they got terminated, and it's our fault, right? And something that we have to take ownership of doing differently.
And I think some behind the scenes information for everybody is it starts early on. It starts with different ingredients, and some of those ingredients are our awareness, our kindness, our seeking to understand others. And it all begins within ourselves. So if you are a parent or maybe you're a mentor, it starts elementary school, middle school, high school. And I was sharing with John, I've been in education for over 2 decades at many different levels, most recently at the state level. And we were very purposeful in the school districts and at the state level with building those community bridges so that kids can see in order to believe in it, and then finally order to achieve. People just don't go into tech if they don't know about tech and don't know people that they can confide in to help support them through their journey in the tech industry too. And we are sitting up here because we know that the tech industry can be more diversified in many different intersectionalities, including gender, including race, including ethnicities. Thank you for that answer, John. Okay, our next question. Have you ever caught yourself in a cognitive bias while interviewing? And then the second part of that is, how have you overcome the unconscious bias that you then were aware of? Tina, I'm going to put you on the spot for that one.
So yes, I have. There's a lot of personality types that you see over and over in this industry, and it's easy to presume when you meet somebody for perhaps the first 5 minutes of an interview that you already know who this person is and what they're doing and where they're going. And then you, in your brain, link it to the history you've had with that type of person, and sometimes it's not good. So when that's happened to me, I, just take a deep breath and kind of go, wait, what are you doing? You just met this person, start over, kind of try to intentionally put that aside. But when this has happened to me, I've also brought that into the discussion room about the hire after. At Amazon, we do a process very much as Jill described, where we put in our independent feedback, and then we all get together to discuss a candidate after the fact. And I've put in feedback, and then I've told my fellow reviewers, I kind of felt this way, and perhaps that wasn't right. And I've had it go both ways. I've had people say, yeah, I saw that too. I think you are right. Or, no, I didn't get that at all. You're crazy, kind of thing. And those are both completely valid.
Thank you. Okay.
Can you hear me? Let me add something real quick to what Justina said.
Thank you,
So
Cam.
that was a really, really great point. The first step, the very first step from my perspective, is to acknowledge that. You need to be aware of its presence. That's the very first step. After that, then you can talk about different solutions. The previous presentation was actually really good. She covered that. Thank you so much for that. Build some structure around solution, what you want to do. Some cases, you might even end up with some kind of question bank. Take away subjectivity as much as you can. So as you start building a structure, you could, fairly be certain that the feedback you're hearing from people is at least based on questions that they ask everyone. It's not just a very specific case for these specific candidates. That's one thing. The other thing is, don't be shy to be involved as a hiring manager throughout the process. Partner with your recruiters. Look at the pipeline. See what kind of candidates they're receiving. So I'm receiving 200 resumes. I just got 200 resumes in my mailbox, and 2 of them are female candidates. Is that normal? Is that really normal? Or maybe we are doing some pre-screening. Or maybe that's normal. Maybe there is a reason that nobody applies for this position. Take a step back. Go have a look at the job description. Are there any keywords in a job description keeping female candidates out of this role? Same thing applies to people, little-aged. So as you look for those keywords, you see, wow, I'm hiring a network architect, and now I have a requirement that this person needs to be able to lift this much, 100 pounds. Or I'm putting keywords in there that specifically talking about young candidates. You might not use the word young, but when I read it, and if I'm, let's say, 60, I'm not going to apply for that role. So make sure your job description is clear. Then don't be shy to proactively reach out to candidates. Let's say you took all the steps and still you're not getting, this example, female candidates. As a hiring manager, as a recruiter team, you can use LinkedIn and many other tools to proactively contact candidates. We had that problem before. We were trying to hire data center technicians. It's a very, very male-dominated space. We're talking about cables, moving things around, and all those things. But we wanted to hire female candidates. We contacted people, even people who were kind of related, but we contacted them and we offered them, look, you can start. You don't have to hit the ground running in day one, but there's going to be a little bit of training, a little bit of learning curve, and you will get there. So it's possible to find those candidates. And there are some other steps that we can talk about those, but these are the early steps that you can at least be sure you're seeing those candidates, you're welcoming those candidates. And we will talk about rest later, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Cam.
Yep.
Next question, Edward. how can tech companies overcome diverse hiring challenges?
Well, I'd say that first for tech companies and any organization that's interested in facing this challenge, I think the first part of it is commitment. You have to want to see this happen. I think the next part is you've got to put some resources to it. Those could be people, doesn't have to necessarily be financially resources. And I think that you have to realize that this is going to take time. A lot of people of color and women come from environments where they haven't been encouraged to, or the opportunities haven't been there. And it's something that's going to take long to see, to see it get to the other end. And I know that speaking for myself, I'm part of that kind of first group that kind of moved into the technology space. And so we had to be shining examples of human beings to get through that process. We had to be bicultural, and I think even, not to speak on behalf of women, but I think they also had to be able to fit into a male environment to be able to get through these processes. So the first us going through, yeah, we kind of broke those molds, but we did so because we had to conform to existing standards to get through. But for companies to kind of, I think, really expand beyond that, they've got to be aware of their own biases, their own processes. They've got to create an environment that is safe and inviting. So, for example, at Nanog, we knew that to change things, it wasn't just so simple to say, yeah, we're going to do a code of conduct and these things. We have to follow through by bringing on an ombuds and really focusing on creating an environment. So as we bring people in who come from diverse backgrounds, they feel safe. They feel like there's a place for them to exist in that. So it's commitment of time, commitment of resources, a desire to do so, and then making sure that your environment is one that's fertile to create that kind of diversity.
Hey, Edward, how about data?
What was that?
Data.
Data.
You need data, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that we talked about outside, if I may, you have to look yourself in the mirror. You have to measure yourself. You have to be willing to be measured, right? So one of the things that, I had an interesting conversation with HR many moons ago. I said, cut the tops and the bottoms off of every resume. But you can't do that. How are we supposed to pick your candidates? And I want to go back to the gentleman from Oracle. How do you know the system wasn't rigged before it got to you? You don't, right? You need the data, right? So one of the things that, and it was a very difficult conversation. I mean, and we made progress, but you need the data, right? You need to know what's happening here so that you can make adjustments, because otherwise you're just guessing, right?
And I think what I'll add is, I've had numerous conversations with different organizations about their processes and procedures and hiring policies. And often I hear what you say, Cam, and what you said, John. Well, we can't do that. And I will tell you, I sat at the state level and I had the same conversation with them. And the center that I ran did do it. We took all names, every single name, off of our candidates who were applying when it went to the group that was interviewing and looking through and sorting through who would be the person interviewed. And we took all addresses on, because we know that zip codes can align to where the person lives, and then you could drill down from that data of maybe who they are because of socioeconomic status, and we understand the opportunity gaps that there is with that. So it is possible. If you are looking to do that, I would be more than happy to talk to you, but the clarifications and the deflecting and the denying of we can't, you can't. It's, are you choosing to sit there with a collective group of people and put the systems and policies and practices in place? Okay, next question, Cam. Do you have any tips for those who are diverse entering the workforce and how to prepare for an interview?
We can talk for hours about this topic. It's a very interesting one, very, very broad topic. Of course I do. But some general tips in this particular context. Let's just talk about this particular context. Don't be shy and contact recruiters on LinkedIn. Do ask them questions. Another thing, kind of two-way, the power of social media. The companies, let's say you believe you have the best and the worst culture. How do I know about this? How am I supposed to know about that before I apply for that role? So create your own videos. post content about your company's culture. On YouTube, on TikTok, anywhere you think, your Instagram, anywhere you think your candidates might see those. Those things matter. You're going to get thousands of views on those videos. And that's one of the ways candidates can find out about your culture, so you can bridge the gap. And as a candidate, I do look for those things. When I want to apply for that position, I'm going to look for videos. I'm going to find out what the offices look like, people look like, what they're talking about. And do your research on the reviews. Most cases, maybe, I don't know, 80, 90% of cases, you can trust reviews that you read about companies after people leave the job interviews. There is one last point. This is an interesting one and kind of double-edged sword, but it's good to talk about it. After an interview, you as a candidate, it's your responsibility to provide feedback, especially if you had negative experience. Do reach out to the hiring manager, do reach out to the recruiter and tell him how it went. Tell him what happened. Tell him you had this great interview, you answered all the questions, but something happened. I had that problem before myself. I had this interview, the other person on the other line wasn't able to hear me properly, and he thought I was doing something worse. No. And I was really lucky to contact the hiring manager and explain the situation. Most hiring managers, in my experience, they want to know your feedback. Why? 2 reasons. You might be a great candidate. 4 out of 5 might have already given him great feedback on you. That's one thing. The other thing is, even if they do want to move on, the next person is not going to run into the same situation. So you could do somebody else a huge favor. So all these things together, I think could make the game a little fairer for everyone. And yeah.
I probably have something to add here. For those who are out there who are diverse and preparing for an interview, you can do it. Stereotype threat is real, and you might feel like you're an imposter sitting in that room. And find some trick for yourself to center yourself and be calm and find a way to perform. One strategy that I've done for this is, as embarrassing as it is to, show your cards to your friends, even if they don't work in whatever field or whatever job you're applying for, give them a script, have them pretend to be an interviewer, and run through a sample interview and how you think it's going to be. Even better is if you can find a mentor to do a practice interview with you. That way you know what to expect. You can calm some of those nerves and practice your strategies to reduce that stereotype threat in your interview.
And for myself, when I found, myself in situations where I was interviewed for something and I didn't get the job, I always try to reach out to the hiring manager and try to ask why. Not even so much from from a critical assessment, but what could I do better for the next interview? What could I learn from that so that when I went down the next series, I would have a kind of a better sense of how I can present myself in a way that's going to be more effective.
Thank you. Before we open it up to questions from the audience, the one thing that I want to ask each of you to share out is something that you've learned, something that has an impact on your heart or your mind that would help others, because we know sitting up here as the diverse panel in many different ways that it is sometimes not easy. It is sometimes very difficult to sit in rooms and be in spaces with certain faces. So what is one thing that you would tell anybody in the audience that could find some familiarity in each of you? Remember this. What's a takeaway that each of us could give to the audience?
I would say I think a big part of this is on us and how we engage and initiate the conversation. Like the more rigid we are, the more we follow the existing process, the less things are going to change. So I go back to something again. Sorry to pick on you, Jill, but like from your talk earlier, make it a conversation, right? Try to keep everybody loose, because once people start freaking out and get stressed out, it's like just the wheels have fallen off the bus and there's no putting them back, right? So like it's important to keep people focused, to have that conversation. And I take that personally, because I remember being on the other side of that, thinking, man, this is rough, right?
Thank you.
I'm going to kind of take this from a nonprofit angle more than my day job. When you're asking somebody to give their time on a program committee, they're an advisory council, things like that, that's a lot of time, and they don't get paid. They get very little for doing that work. And so you really have to go recruit people. The people that want that role want to be on a stage. They want to be seen. They want that chance to be very visible. We have a lot of those people coming forward, but that doesn't give us diversity in the room to make good policy and good choices. So we have to go find the people that we know are going to be impressive, that don't have that confidence in themselves, find them, invest in them years in advance sometimes, and build them up. And we all have somebody in our community like that you can find and you can work on building. And if we all do that, we will help fix this problem.
Thank you for that, Tina. That was great. And kind of dovetailing off that, I'll speak kind of from another perspective. I think every one of us on this panel, when you're oftentimes the first person into that group, there is someone a gatekeeper, who decided you had something and they were willing to take their time and energy to be able to kind of bring you along, to take you under their wing, to teach you the things that you needed to know. And a mentorship is what I'm referring to. And so that in talking to this room, every one of you are potential mentors. Maybe there is someone who's new on your job and you see in your work environment and you see them floundering. How can you step in and a kind word, a little bit of direction, something that can help them kind of make it through that maze of kind of working in corporate America. One of the things that I've seen oftentimes that happens is that we tend to hire people like ourselves. So you get in an environment and everyone is kind of clones of someone else and they kind of think and talk and work in a particular way. And how can you help break that ice? How can you help that person feel more comfortable in that environment and be an advocate to help for change and to foster diversity within your own organization?
Everyone's doing so great, so inspiring. This is for both interviewees and interviewers, really rethink perfection. When you are sitting in that interviewing room, especially if you don't look like the people who are interviewing you, there's a huge pressure to feel like you need to be perfect. And in many cases throughout history, people have needed to do that. And it is okay to make mistakes. That is how we learn. And when I'm coding, I have learned the most through the mistakes that I've made. Talk to anyone who's caused an outage, they learned from it. So we all have to learn through experience. And I would just want to remind interviewers that that is the same as well. People make mistakes, but the important thing is to learn, what did the person do after they made a mistake? So that is an important thing to think about. Maybe it's not perfection that we are seeking. Maybe it's how you respond in the event of an error.
Thank you. Everybody covered almost everything I wanted to say, but let me just look at this chain once again and responsibilities of a hiring manager to make this process as fair as possible. On the very first point, you need to make sure the message gets the candidates. We talked about social media and other ways. The message about your culture and what your values are. Second thing is training for your recruiters, inclusive training, diversity training, all these things. Make sure everyone is on the same page. You can absolutely make a difference here. You need to be involved in that process. After that, you receive the resumes. You might want to do blind screening or any kind of screening, but you need to keep that process fair. Another point, one step further, when you want to interview the candidates, you choose the interviewers. Make sure they've gone through diversity training, inclusive training, to understand what it means to, at least for 1 hour, 45 minutes, just put aside all biases, interview these candidates. And during the debrief process, again, that's your responsibility to hear that message and separate the two. What is true and what is this person's perception? After that, when you want to hire that person, when the actual hiring happens, beyond that point, it's all the company's culture and how you can retain people in the right culture. So end-to-end as hiring manager, you have responsibilities. And we also talked about your responsibility as a candidate to provide feedback and help us make better decisions and get better. Thank you.
Man. So one of the things that I find myself, working at today is combating assumptions, right? Going back to the last couple of comments that you both had, outages and things going wrong, you can't prevent those things. They're going to happen. They're like bugs in software, right? It's really preparing the people for how they react in such situations. And I hear these two words individually or together more often than I care to admit: should and should just. Drives me absolutely out of my mind, right? And I find myself taking a breath these days saying, okay, what's the best way to help reduce the usage of those words, and what happens behind them? Because like when those words get used a lot, bad things happen, and then ultimately, it has a morale impact, right? And that's also not good for anything that we're trying to talk about up here, right? So I find myself taking a breath, and if I can't effectively articulate that, which happens on occasion, right? Then I find myself taking the steps required to show people in advance. I have a very good friend of mine who works in your space, the cloud space. I mean, the breakneck speeds that you guys are operating at now is just unbelievable. I mean, I thought cable was breakneck. Oh my God, dude, like what you guys are doing unbelievable. But he's going through this very same struggle. Well, we have outages. These people can't manage outage windows and dates and expectations. I say, hey man, take a breath. I said, maybe they just don't know. Maybe you have to teach them, right? And it's the weirdest thing because it's the most fundamental, basic thing that you find yourself. I'm watching him from the outsider looking in, saying, yeah, hey, maybe you need to just take 5 steps back and start to like educate your people. And in the heat of the moment, future, it's tough, right? It's like building the plane that's going, Mach whatever, and trying to replace parts on it. It's brutal.
Okay. So now we would like to open it up to the audience with questions that you may have to ask us on the panel.
I'll be selfish as the moderator for the session, but I guess my name is Marlene. I am Tina's employee. And can proudly say that because Tina's an amazing boss, but mostly because she has found the time to develop me as I've progressed in my role. I think that there aren't many others that do that. I think she can also appreciate the unique qualities and perspectives that I can bring to the org. I think speaking for me personally, as taking a lot of boxes for other things, I went sort of through an identity crisis during college and I think after, because I felt, oh, I'm brown, oh, I'm a woman, oh, like I'm Hispanic. I need to kind of downplay that to fit in. And I think I found over time that maybe employers like to have those unique things come through. And I don't need to be afraid of being the loud person in the room and making people uncomfortable because it makes people comfortable later with other people like me. So maybe it's a question of, do you value those unique qualities, and how do you see or how do you appreciate the diversity in a candidate without making them feel like they're a token and something to be traded?
I'll respond a little bit because a little biased here. So a interesting thing for me is I started in cable. John and I know each other from way back in those days, and now I'm in cloud and all of that. And when I started my career, I was the only female network engineer at Time Warner for a long time. I was definitely, when I came to conferences and things like that, trying to blend in with the guys. Do whatever the guys are doing. Let them think of you as a woman, was kind of my mantra, because if they were thinking of me as a woman, they weren't talking to me about anything technical. and it wasn't effective. When I had a chance to start taking on leadership roles, first in nonprofit, then in my day job, I had to kind of shift. There was this new generation of women coming in that were wearing dresses at work. It was crazy. And I was like, wait, they're not hiding that they're female anymore. And I found myself really not liking them at first. I was like, who do they think they are? They have to, play this game or they're not going to be, they're bringing us all down. And then I started talking to them and they were really smart and they had a lot to contribute. And I found they gave me more of a voice in a room because I was always afraid of having a different opinion. And I started to see different was good. Different isn't a bad thing, like I had felt for so many years. So it really, really shifted. And during my time on the advisory council, I was able to recruit women and people from the Caribbean to participate and bring diversity to that group. We got up to parity at one point. We had more women than men because it's a 15-person group. We tipped over just one. And then my team, when we were hiring, it was just a non-issue. It was the best candidate for the job, but we did our job recs in a way that encouraged people of all cultures and genders to apply. And I really feel like it was able to build a great team because of it. So, yeah.
I have something to add. Thank you. Thank you. So let's take a quick step back. I want to ask a question, a very critical question that someone should have asked. The question is very basic. Why do we need diversity? Why inclusion? I mean, what happens? Let's say I want to hire 10 network architects, and I go out and hire 10 CAMs, people like myself. So I clone myself, hire all the 10, and now we have this thing. I think Edward kind of answered that. Creativity and innovation. People like me, people coming from the exact same background, we tend to think similarly. And sometimes we don't see all different perspectives. When you have people from different backgrounds and walks of life, you're going to see a lot more innovation and creativity. We've seen that in action. Thank you.
I'll just say one small thing. At NANOG, we're fortunate enough that we do have a diverse staff. And for me as the executive director, having a group of people who don't think like I do is critical. And empowering them to be able to have ownership of their areas, allowing them to be able to make decisions, allowing them to be able to make mistakes. Sometimes I think it's important to have an environment where I'm not afraid to fail, that I know that if I do something wrong, that the world is not going to crush on me and it's not going to kill my sense of creativity. Sometimes my staff will argue with me. Sometimes they'll tell me I'm flat out wrong. And in their areas of expertise, I tend to defer to them. It takes something pretty strong for me to say, no, let's do this my way, because I want them to feel they own it. And as a result, we're able to do all that we do here with such a small staff because they're empowered and they have a diversity of thinking. And I appreciate that diversity of thought. It makes me a better leader having people like that working for me.
May I? Marlene, one comment. I got to I think in my career, I got to the point where what color your skin or gender, whatever, it kind of became very, there's an eye-opening experience I had a few years ago. I'm going to say about 5 or 6 years ago. There's a gentleman who worked for me. He was from India. He was a Muslim, right? Which apparently is pretty uncommon, right? I wasn't aware because I'm not familiar with like what religion is where and across India. Very quiet, super just doesn't want to speak out, right? But this gentleman, given the opportunity, was helping to make our infrastructure so much better. And so for me, it got to the point where it just didn't matter all those other things that you asked about, right? Are you making the business better? And at the end of the day, for me, it was always about, are we serving the customer, right? Are we taking care of their needs? Are we doing right by them? And if we're all on the same page, then I don't really care where you're from, right? And ultimately, culturally, there needed to be a environment set for him, and then turns out for many others who just were silent about it, right? So that we could better serve our customers. The suppression of great ideas that was happening was concerning, right? It was actually very unhealthy, and it was very bad for the customer, very bad for business, right? So I mean, I think from my perspective, that's been my motto for a long time. I mean, I hope that's helpful.
Anyone else have any questions to ask?
Hey everyone. Hi, I'm Louis Lee, Google Fiber. If I'm interviewing for a job, actually I'm not, but if I were to be, I understand that they're looking for something that they don't have probably don't have internally already. How do I, as an interviewee, make you see that it's valuable that I may have a unique background, perspective, experience that's different from all your other candidates to try to sell myself better to you? And then on the flip side, how do you as an interviewer maybe need to tease that out of your candidates to see what uniqueness they may bring to your team that you don't already have, and get your candidate talking in that direction, assuming that they already meet your basic minimum requirements?
So thanks, Louis. So for me, what's been very helpful. I mean, so many different answers over so many different years. I mean, after doing this for 25 years, you get somebody who really wants to, and I think this is something we should talk about as a community, right? I did this cool thing in software, this algorithm, this BGP config or whatever, right? Okay, so what? Right. So I'm not trying to be belligerent about it, but at the end of the day, what I find, Louis, that actually resonates the most, broadly, is what's the business impact? What's the impact to the customers, right? So from my perspective, over the past 25 plus years, I have found that that's the quickest way to get me to kind of associate cool with what's valuable to me, right? Because if my customers aren't happy, I can't hire you, right? I'm not going to have the money. I might be fired, right? Like a lot of things could be happening there, right? So for me, I think that's an opportunity for us here to kind of to make sure that we're taking on innovative things that we're doing here and bringing them back to real outcomes, whether they are customer experience outcomes or business outcomes, right? That's for what it's worth.
I have something to add. So as a candidate, I really recommend just journaling about what is your personal story, and thinking about maybe a more positive spin on that for those of us who can be really hard on ourselves. So think about what story you want to tell yourself before you think about the story you want to tell others. So when somebody asks you the question, tell me about a time you had a conflict, maybe you're not thinking about the time you had to go to HR, but you're thinking about maybe something that would reflect your personal story better and the story that you want to tell. Because your story is powerful, and the more that you believe in your story, the more you can bring that into elements of the interview for other people to see. And as an interviewer, similarly, keep your antennas up for maybe if somebody is being hard on themselves, try to find a way to coach them into, not unfairly providing hints or anything, but maybe guiding the conversation. You are there as an interviewer to provide structure and guide the conversation so that you can get evidence for making a decision. So if you're entering a territory where you're like, oh, I don't know if this is helping me make a decision, and help the candidate perform, keep them in a maybe more positive space.
From my end, I always try to, and this is a little unconventional maybe, is to honor the fact that a person is taking their time to apply for a job. And I try to start out by creating an environment, this is me being the interviewer, that they feel comfortable. How can I make them relax? So I take the resume, I put it face down on the table, and I just start a conversation. Try to pull them out of their shell, just give them a free space where they feel comfortable to be who they are. and then I kind of roll into the interview, because there, I find at that point I get more of a genuine human being that I'm talking to, as opposed to someone who's all prepped and ready for the trick questions I'm going to give them with certain trick answers that are going to come back. I want to know who this person is, because it's all about building relationships. It's building about culture and community within the work environment. So I want to know who this person is. So that, because oftentimes I've hired people who maybe on paper they didn't read well, but when you start to talk to them and really get to know them as a person, you start to see, wow, there's something deeper in there. And I can work with that as an employer to bring out and have a great hire.
I want to add something to that too, Edward, for the people out there who are part of HR or the people hiring. If you go back to basics, we each have to write our own resume. Some of us don't know how to write a resume well, and some of us don't have resources to pay to have somebody write the resume, or don't have mentors who are open to helping them write that resume that they then can hand in that would be aligned to everything that you're asking for. So those are the things that we have to start thinking about and looking at when we are asking for diverse candidates to come in, that sometimes the opportunities that others have been afforded aren't the exact same opportunities that of the diverse candidates that you're asking to be there at the table. Cam?
I would like to add something. So we covered the interview process. Excellent answers. I exactly do the same. But what if your resume never makes it to my mailbox? So it is always a possibility, right? There are so many steps, and I think there is a big regret here and some opportunities. The regret is, I don't think there is any intelligent software out there today to process a bunch of resumes and to find that story, that unique background, that diverse background, and highlight it as one of the things that I need to see. Out of 500 resumes, resume number 78 has this great background and story. It doesn't exist today. But there are some opportunities here. One of them is for companies to improve their referral process. So one of the, I guess, main ways for us to find candidates is a referral process. Going to minorities and diverse communities and within our organization and offering bonuses and getting referrals from that group of people usually leads to diverse candidates. That's my experience. The other thing is get your message out, create your own assets, create your own blogs, YouTube videos, talk on the internet. I will find you. When I'm hiring, I do my own research. I'm not going to sit here and wait for resumes. I look for the top blog posts on a particular topic. I look for those keywords, and I want to see who's talking about this. That's another way. And of course, working in partnership with my recruiters to be sure that we're not filtering you out early stage. Why? Because you might not check all the boxes. You don't, probably, but you also check a box that nobody else does. I want to see that. So there is a little human element here too, but enabling that organization is definitely part of my plan. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other, oh, we have one more question.
I'm Sean Winstep with Nanoc, and I have a daughter who is a software engineering major, and she is extremely introverted. And we did a panel on introverts versus extroverts. How does that play into interviewing someone who is shy and introverted versus someone that is very well-spoken and very confident, and they may not necessarily be the better candidate, it's just that they're an introvert?
Is Kat here? No, the other one that did the panel earlier. Kat Hunter? No? I saw her at lunch, and it's kind of funny, Sean, that you bring this up, and I almost forgot all about it, that we talked earlier about it. I actually personally think there's a direct relationship to it, right? Because if you're an introvert, which I'm not, right? You have this challenge, this kind of inherent challenge where, these challenges, opportunities that we're talking about here, they never get bubbled up. You never hear about them. Why? Because you're an introvert, right? And you're not going to say anything to anybody, right? You're gonna like bottle up and hope somebody else deals with it for you, right? So I was talking to Kat about it at lunch. I think, you know, from an analog cross-topic pollination perspective, that would make for a fantastic conversation, right? Because I think they are related, right? And I think that's part of the reason why, like, you know, people, thankfully, Future organized this for us. We're basically helping to be maybe that voice, but I think we got to find ways to kind of get that out there because it's a thing, right?
I'll also comment on this one. It may be hard to believe now, but I used to be incredibly shy, and I'm definitely more of an introvert. I've gotten over it quite a bit, but it started that way. I would say it's also really helpful to have a mentor relationship where somebody can review a job posting and do the mock interviews ahead with them, but also tell them the really important message that you are qualified for this job. You absolutely deserve to be in that room, and they need to hear it much more than an extrovert needs to hear it. And getting somebody that can work with them on those type of things is really critical for them to know their own value before they walk into that room.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Just a little thing to add, maybe a little story, probably it helps. Many years ago, I used to go to school in Australia. And interesting, so I want to talk about the responsibility of the employers. You ask about a candidate, but let me just take this to this side of the table. Many job descriptions, I vividly remember this, many job descriptions, they would ask for outstanding communication skills, outstanding presentation skills. I got one of those positions. And I suppose I was not the most qualified candidate, but I was the extrovert one. So I got that role for 1 year, maybe even more than a year. 95% of the time, I only talked to my manager. There was this guy, and the 12 of us would talk. So now reflecting, why would they need excellent, outstanding communication skills? So as hiring managers and employers, we need to be sure that our expectations are reasonable. If you need someone to present something to a group of people, 100 people every day, yeah, you might want to look for someone with outstanding presentation skills. But if you're looking for someone to do any kind of quote-unquote back office work or anything that is not necessarily every single day customer-facing or presentation related, you don't have to look for outstanding communication skills. That would keep a lot of qualified candidates out, and they would not apply for your positions.
I'll also add, confidence is not competence. So if you are a candidate and you're feeling very not confident and very quiet and very shy, find a way to make yourself feel comfortable, and it's okay to speak up for your needs. It's okay to tell the recruiter you're working with ahead of time, hey, I'm generally pretty quiet. If you could, give me any tips on how the interview process is going to go ahead of time. Typically, they know the process, and you can ask exactly how many interviewers you're going to have. You can ask probably who's going to be on your interview loop. You can research them ahead of time so that you have maybe some piece of personal connection you can make with them. You can strategize on how to overcome those nerves, and you can do it. And then on the other side of the table, if you are interviewing somebody, don't let somebody who's really good at selling themselves kind of pull the wool over your eyes on actual skills assessment. So it's important to assess each category of skills that you're looking at. And that's why I recommend really thinking about your job descriptions ahead of time, and do you really need outstanding presentation skills for this role? So that can help you really decide where is this person very strong and where might they need growth.
I'll just add one kind of small thing. I think in terms of careers, there are more introverts in technology than any other career path. So yes, there's going to be the challenge of the initial kind of interview and presentations, but there's an overwhelming amount of introverts in technology. So I think ultimately she'll be just fine.
One last comment. So Sean, two things, right? It pains me to think how many great ideas never found their way out of somebody's mouth. disturbing how much awesomeness is just never made its way out because of somebody being potentially an introvert. I also think it's on us, right? Edward said this earlier, instead of having this rigid process, I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, I will research people that I'm interviewing, right? So that I could help break that ice and make this a natural conversation instead of like a grueling conversation. It's the best way, right? I mean, I think we have to keep bringing this back to like, what can we do, right? Because we're up here, they're not, right? And I think it's on us to do our best to help out there, right?
So I think that's all the questions from the audience. And at the end, we just want to share with you that we're up here as a labor of love. And you're there as a labor of love too. And we're just asking people to sit in their own self-awareness, to find who you are and the familiarity you could find in every other human that you encounter in life. And then at the end, how can you take action? And take action starts with each of us individually, in our hearts and our minds, by saying we too can be the change that we hope to see in our communities, in our schools, and in our workplaces, while also centering your own harmony for being and not just doing. We'd like to end with a quote. And that quote is, "Diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice that we make every day. As leaders, we have to put out the message that we embrace and not just tolerate diversity." So I hope when you leave here today that you're doing more than just tolerating diversity, that you are embracing it. Be well, and thank you for coming.